And Deputy Mick Wallace.
Yeah, Richard isn't coming, so he's...
So you're taking, yeah, so that's fine. So you're taking his 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, you please.
No.
Thank you very much.
By everybody? Deputy Wallace, you may continue.
Now, Brendan, if I'm lucky enough to get elected, I hope you won't miss me in Wexford.
Miss you terribly.
Chair, please.
Won't be the same, will it?
Chair.
Minister, there's many challenges facing Europe, and many of them are connected, and two of them that I find connected are the manner in which so many aspects of terrorism are carried out and global warming. I see a lot of terrible things happen in the world in the pursuit of oil, and you wouldn't have to be a rocket scientist to work out that the trouble in the Middle East area has from the beginning been strongly linked to the pursuit of oil and the control of the price of it. And we've also seen we've seen some terrible atrocities in Yemen, especially since 2015, although it really began a bit earlier, when in 2011 the Yemenis people said no to their leadership because they didn't like the neoliberal policies that he was trying to implement on behalf of the Saudis and the US, and sadly Obama and the Saudis and the UN unfortunately engaged in an effort at regime change by putting Haiti in place in power, unelected, in place of Salah, who had been there before him, which the Yemenis had rejected. They also rejected Haiti after that, and that led to the war, which began in March 2015. And we now have a situation where we are told by independent sources that over 13 million people are at risk of starvation, which is a huge indictment, not just on the countries involved, but which include France and the UK, but the failure of the European Union to seriously challenge what's going on in Yemen is nothing short of a total disgrace. In Yemen, there is a chase for the resources of Yemen, and that's what it's all about. The same as much of terrorism around the world has been linked to oil. In 2016 alone, European countries, the EU, gave licence to the export of 28 billion euros worth of arms to the Middle East area. France alone got licence to export almost 4 billion euros worth of arms to that area. Now, we've seen terrible things happen in Libya of late. Now, that obviously began not with Gaddafi, but with the overthrow of Gaddafi in 2011 and the bombing by NATO, which destroyed the place. And France has played a very poor role of late. It was bad enough that France and the UK and the US led the bombing in 2011 and caused untold destruction and ended up killing about 40,000 people and doing a lot more damage since. But of late, France has been very active in its support of Haftar, who is nothing short of a brutal military thug. But sadly, he was protected by the US, where he moved and lived in Virginia, not far from CIA headquarters, and went back to Libya when the bombs started falling. And he took control of Benghazi in 2017, thanks to French support. Now, it's terrible that the European Union actually doesn't have the wherewithal to prevent France from behaving like this. And it would be great if we could call France to account. It would be very hard for a small country like Ireland to stop them from behaving as they do. But the least we should do is challenge their behaviour and call them out, because Libya is descending further into chaos, and France has played a poor role. I asked the Taoiseach yesterday what he thought of the role that France had played, but he refused to answer my question. And, Minister, I would like an answer of some sort from the government as to what they think of the role that France is presently playing in Libya. The pursuit of oil is also directly linked to what's going on in Venezuela. And while I didn't like to upset the party here today for Nancy Pelosi, I was very tempted to come in here with a Venezuelan flag and a Julian Assange T-shirt, but given that it wasn't actually an official Dáil sitting, out of respect to the Ceann Comhairle, I decided to give it a miss. The recognition of Juan Guaido as the interim president of Venezuela is a total breach of international law, just as the US sanctions, which are designed, the economic sanctions, which are designed to impoverish Venezuela and to cripple the country, are also unlawful. But no one seems to give a damn about international law anymore. But the pursuit of oil in Venezuela is paramount to the US approach to it, and I was really saddened that the European countries, including Ireland, decided to also recognise Guaido, a far right-wing thug from a very well-off background who doesn't have 5% of the support of the people of Venezuela. Recognising him was a terrible insult to international law and any form of democracy. John Bolton was arrogant enough to go on television and said that he can't wait for Venezuelan oil to be under the control of American companies. Well, in fairness to him, he wasn't hiding it anyway. And we have watched Venezuela, just like Cuba did for so long, fight the indomitable might of Americans' economic might and military might in order to try and survive. Any interest that America has in Venezuela has nothing to do with the interest of the people of Venezuela, and I wish that Europe would wake up to that and Europe start to work for mediation between the government and opposition and cut the Americans out of the equation, and let's come up with something that makes sense. US sanctions against Iran, more madness. And we have found lately that there's been funding of terrorist groups inside Iran by the US and Israel, which an investigation by Seymour Hersh revealed. That the Bush administration had been funding covert operations inside Iran designed to destabilise the country's leadership since 2005. And since then, a number of leaders of terrorist organisations have revealed their links to US and Israeli finance, weapons and training, that the US recently declared the Iranian National Army a terrorist organisation, and no one batted an eyelid. It's frightening. On the link between terrorism and climate change, I mean, we are staring climate breakdown straight in the face. The majority of governments in the world are all giving lip service to taking action on tackling the crisis, and the EU says nothing, while the most powerful countries on earth lie, invade, fight and kill over the fossil fuels that should stay in the ground. But if we're to have any chance in hell of stopping the worst of climate breakdown, this has to stop. I'll finish with the madness of Julian Assange's arrest. I think people need to understand that the arrest of Julian Assange is a threat to good journalists the world over. Remember, and in fairness to the Swedish prosecutor, they went to the Ecuadorian embassy and they interviewed Assange and dropped the charges a few months later. The US Justice Department never went to the Ecuadorian embassy to interview Assange. But now, Pelosi's crowd, the Democrats, even they've joined forces with the most reactionary of Trump's crowd in demonising Assange. This is nonsense, absolute madness. I mean, for the Brits, for Britain to actually keel over and bow down to the US desire to have Assange arrested and possibly extradited now to a US justice, so-called justice. I mean, if he ends up before the US federal justice system, he might never be seen again.
Thanks.
But I mean, God be with the day, Britain once an empire so big that they boasted that the sun never set on it. Where are they now? A pawn of the US. How sad.
Deputy.